Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today our first lecture in the general pathology. What is the pathology? Pathology is the scientific study of disease. It is divided into general pathology, specific pathology. General pathology, what is the meaning of general pathology? Pathology is the study of the basic reaction of cells and tissues to abnormal stimuli that underlie all diseases. That's me. General pathology is the basic to understand what diseases can happen to the human being. A specific pathology, the study of specific responses of specialized organs and tissue to specific stimuli. The four aspects that comprise the core of the pathology are the etiology and the pathogenesis, morphological changes, clinical significance. To know the pathology, should know these four basic things: etiology and pathogenesis, morphological changes, and clinical significance. What is the etiology? That's mean the cause of the disease, okay? Pathogenesis, the mechanism of disease development, how the disease can occur, the mechanism that lead to the disease, okay? Morphological changes, that structural alteration induced in cells and tissues by the diseases. Clinical significance, the functional consequences of the morphological changes. Content of the course: cell injury, adaptation and cell death, acute inflammation, chronic inflammation, healing and repair, neoplasia, basis to genetic disorders, basis to hemodynamic and hemodynamic disorder. What is the homeostasis? Homeostasis is a steady state. What is the steady state? A relatively constant or stable internal environment in which the patient is healthy. There is no any disease occur in his body. Normally maintained by the cells to accommodate changing demand and extracellular stresses. Okay, that's clear. A steady state which relatively constant or stable internal environment. Cell response to adverse influences can lead to cellular adaptation or cell injury or intracellular accumulation. What is the cellular adaptation? Can lead to hypertrophy, hyperplasia, atrophy, and metaplasia. Cell injury can be reversible or irreversible, and intracellular accumulation, the accumulation of materials inside the cells. What is the cell injury? Cell injury is defined as a variety of stresses a cell encounter as a result of changes in its internal and external environment. Okay? The cellular response to stress may vary and depend upon the following variable. The cellular response depends on variables. What is this? The type of cell and tissue involved in this cell injury, the type and duration and severity are important variables. Under physiological stresses or pathological can undergo adaptation to achieve a new steady state that would be compatible with viability in the new environment. Okay, cell injury results when cells are stressed and can no longer adapt. Injury may progress through a reversible stage. If the injury is too severe, irreversible injury occur and affected cells die through necrosis or apoptosis. We'll know all these descriptions inshallah. What are the causes of cell injury? Causes in cell injury can be by hypoxia, physical agents, chemical and drugs, microbiological agent, immunologic reaction, genetic defect, nutritional imbalance, aging. What is all this? Hypoxia, that's mean oxygen deficiency, mainly due to either ischemia, which mean impaired blood supply, and this is most common, inadequate oxygenation of the blood if there is cardio or respiratory failure, cardiorespiratory failure, loss of oxygen carrying capacity. There is oxygen, but there is no carrying capacity of the blood to this oxygen, for example, in the anemia. Carbon monoxide poisoning, all these can lead to hypoxia. Second thing, physical agent like trauma, radiation, extremes of temperature, very cold temperature, very hot temperature, or electric shock. Chemical and drugs, there is a lot of chemicals, a lot of drugs can lead to the cell injury. Microbial agent as viruses, worms, bacteria, and so on. Immunologic reaction, for example, allergic reaction or autoimmune diseases. Genetic defect, obvious congenital malformation like Down syndrome, subtle single amino acid substitution in hemoglobin S of sickle cell anemia, nutritional imbalances like deficiency of nutrient or excess of these nutrients, and aging. Look at this diagram. If there is normal cell in the homeostasis state, okay, then cells exposed to stress or injurious stimuli. For example, if exposed to stress can lead to adaptation of these cells. If these cells can't to adapt, that will lead to cell injury. Or if this normal cell exposed to injurious stimuli, that will lead to cell injury. If the cell injury is mild or transient, this will be a reversible injury and can return back to the normal cell. But if the cell injury is severe and progressive, this will lead to irreversible injury. What then what is the fate? Either cell death by necrosis or apoptosis if this stress is very severe and lead to irreversible injury. What is the adaptation? Adaptation are reversible changes in the number, size, phenotype, metabolic activity or function of cells in response to changes in their environment. Look at this diagram, adaptation, atrophy, hypertrophy, hyperplasia, metaplasia, these all pictures of adaptation of the cells. What is the atrophy? Atrophy means decrease in size or number of cells leading to reduction in the tissue of the mass. Look at the diagram at the right. This this is the normal cells in the left, and the atrophy, there is decrease in the size of these cells. Hypertrophy, increase in the size of cells leading to increase in the size of the organ. Look at the picture. Hyperplasia, that's mean, sorry for interruption, hyperplasia, that's mean increase in the number of cells, and this will lead to increase the size of the organs. Increase of the number of the cells, this means hyperplasia. Metaplasia is the replacement of one type of the cells by the another type of the cells. For example, in this diagram, columnar cell transformed to squamous cells. Cellular adaptation to the stress, hypertrophy, we said, increase in the cell and organ size, often in response to increased workload induced by growth factors produced in response, for example, to mechanical stress or other stimuli. Occur in cells that are incapable of dividing, hypertrophy, or can be physiologic or pathologic. The example of this, increased demand like in the skeletal muscle in exercise or myocardium in hypertension. Specific hormonal stimulation like in the uterus in pregnancy due to hormone, there is hypertrophy in the uterus. The picture, the small one, this is a normal uterus, and the gravid one is the pregnant uterus. Morphological or the histology, look at the cells. The above, this is a normal uterus, and the below this hypertrophied cells. This, the picture above is the normal heart, and the below there is hypertrophy of the muscle of the left ventricular of the heart due to hypertension, for example. Hyperplasia increased the cell number in response to hormones and other growth factor. Here number. In hyperplasia, there is increase in the number, not size. Size hypertrophy. Increasing the number is hyperplasia, okay? Observe the difference. Occurs in tissues whose cells are able to divide. Once there is increase in the cell number, that means the cells can divide or contain abundant tissue stem cells. Can be also physiologic or pathologic. Physiologic, for example, in the hormonal breast during pregnancy, or compensatory like in partial hepatectomy. Pathologic, if the excessive hormonal or growth factor, like in absolute or relative increase in estrogen over progesterone in the endometrial hyperplasia. Look at this hyperplasia. Look to the number of the glands in the above picture and look to the abundant number of these increasing the glands in this lower picture. This example for hyperplasia. Atrophy decreases. On the hypertrophy, there is increase in the cell size. In the atrophy, there is decrease in cell and organ size as a result of decreased nutrient supply or disuse of these organs, associated with decreased synthesis of cellular building block and increased breakdown of cellular organelles. Causes of this atrophy can be immobilization of a limb, for example, to permit healing of fracture in the called disuse atrophy. If one person, for example, his hands is broken, she will for a long time don't use this limb, will lead to atrophy of this limb. If there is loss of innervation or diminished blood supply, inadequate nutrition, loss of endocrine stimulation, and aging, this is called senile atrophy. Look at this picture. Look at the B. This is a normal brain. Okay. Observe there is wide gyri and narrow sulci. But look at the A. There is atrophy. There is widening of sulci and the narrowing of the gyri of the brain. This atrophy in old age patient. Look to the difference of the limb, because this user is atrophy in the right one. Now metaplasia. What is the metaplasia? Metaplasia means change in phenotype of differentiated cells, often in response to chronic irritation that makes cells better able to withstand the stress, usually induced by altered differentiation pathway of tissue stem cells, may result in reduced function or increased propensity for malignant transformation, for example. There is squamous metaplasia, like a respiratory epithelium, that can occur if the patient has a cigarette smoking, or there is vitamin A deficiency. This can lead to squamous metaplasia of respiratory epithelium. Or, for example, in intestinal metaplasia, in lower esophageal epithelium, when there is chronic gastric reflux. This, but it's esophagus, there is transformation from columnar cells. Observe the squamous keratinized squamous cells in the above, transform from columnar to the squamous. This bears esophagus in chronic gastric reflux. This also squamous metaplasia. Summary of cell changes. At the middle is normal cells. If there is increase in the number of cells, this hyperplasia, there is increase in the size of the cells. This hypertrophy, there is decrease in size, this atrophy. The other type, change in the cell type, this is called metaplasia. If there is different shapes of the cells, this is called dysplasia, and this here will start to transform to malignant. Cell injury are two types, either reversible or irreversible. Reversible when the injury, we said, if limited and cell return to stable baseline, or irreversible injury when the injury is severe, persistent stress result in death of the affected cell. Cell death has two forms, either necrosis or apoptosis. We'll know these names of cell death, okay? Causes of the cell injury, we said, like in oxygen deprivation, hypoxia, reduced blood flow, ischemia, inadequate oxygenation of the blood, in cardiorespiratory failure, decreased blood oxygen carrying capacity like in anemia, carbon monoxide poisoning, physical agent, as we said, mechanical trauma, extremes of temperature, tension, atmospheric pressure, radiation or electric shock, chemical agents and drugs, infectious agent, immunologic reactions, or genetic derangement, like for there is congenital malformation like in Down syndrome, or subtle single amino acid substitution. There is change in the just one single amino acid. This can lead to is either from the normal hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin A. If there is nutritional imbalances like protein, calorie, and or vitamin deficiencies, or there is nutritional excess if there is overnutrition or aging. Reversible cell injury. The two main morphological correlates of the reversible cell injury are what it occurred to these cells. There is either cellular swelling or fatty change. In cellular swelling, there is hypertrophic change or vacuolar degeneration. Okay. In the fatty change, there is accumulation of the fats in these cells. Cellular swelling is the result of failure of energy-dependent ion pump in the plasma membrane, leading to an inability to maintain ionic and fluid homeostasis. It is the earliest change in the reversible cell injury. Grossly, the organ is paler on increase of the weight because there is accumulation of fluids. Microscopy, there is small clear cytoplasmic vacuoles. That means there is accumulation of fluids. In the fatty change occur in hypoxic injury and in various forms of toxic or metabolic injury, and is manifested by the appearance of small or large lipid vacuoles in the cytoplasm. Look at the normal liver and look to the fatty liver. Look to the accumulation of the fats. This white pulse is a lipid vacuoles. The intracellular changes associated with reversible injury include plasma membrane alteration such as blebbing, blunting or distortion of the microvilli, and loosening of the intercellular attachment. Okay, and there is mitochondrial change such as swelling and the appearance of phospholipid-rich amorphous densities. There is dilatation of the endoplasmic reticulum with detachment of ribosome and dissociation of polysomes. There is also nuclear alteration with clumping of the chromatin of the nucleus. The cytoplasm may contain phospholipid masses called myelin figures, which are derived from the damaged cellular membrane. We'll see all these in the diagram. Look at this diagram. In the left, this normal cells and these normal cells, the difference between necrosis and apoptosis. In the normal cells, if there is reversible cell injury, then there is myelin figures inside the cytoplasm. There is swelling in the endoplasmic reticulum and in the mitochondrium. Observe the name. There is this membrane blip. Look, the membrane change and make membrane blips. If the injury from in this state can be if the injury stimuli is decreased or disappeared, can return back to the normal recovery. But if the injury continued and severe, this will lead to there will be inflammation, there is breakdown of the plasma membrane, organelles, and nucleus, leakage of the content. There is amorphous densities in mitochondria. But look, in apoptosis, if the normal cell In the normal cell, what is the apoptosis? It is mean programmed cell death. The cell kills itself. Okay. What is called? What is occur in apoptosis? The normal cells occur in it. There is condensation of the chromatin. There is membrane blips. There is cellular fragmentation. Formation of apoptotic bodies. Then these apoptotic bodies will be phagocytized by neutrophil and macrophage. Okay. This diagram explain the duration of injury and effect of this injury to the cells. If the duration of injury is for short time, this will lead to reversible cell injury. But if the injury is continued and severe, this can lead to biochemical alteration, ultrastructural changes, light microscopic change, gross morphologic change. This will lead to irreversible injury and cell death either by necrosis or apoptosis. Okay. Again, mechanism of cell injury. There is decrease in ATP, which lead to multiple downstream effects. There is mitochondrial change. This will lead to leakage of pro-apoptotic proteins. There is entry of calcium in the cells. This will lead to increase the mitochondrial permeability and activation of multiple cellular enzymes can lead to the cell death. Increase in ribosomes. Okay. Increase in reactive oxygen species. This will lead to damage to lipids, proteins, and DNA. There is also membrane damage. This membrane, either plasma membrane or lysosomal membrane. Plasma membrane can lead to loss of cellular component, or lysosomal membrane which lead to enzymatic digestion of cellular component. There is protein misfolding and DNA damage. This will lead to activation of pro-apoptotic proteins and lead to the cell death. What is occurring ATP depletion? That's mean there is failure of energy dependent function or necrosis. If the example, for example, there is ischemia. Once there is ischemia, there is decrease in oxygen. This will affect the mitochondria. There is decrease in oxidative phosphorylation. That means there is decrease in ATP. Decrease in ATP, that means decrease in energy of the cells. This will lead to decrease in sodium pump. What's occur then? There is influx of calcium and water and sodium inside the cells. Once there is increase in the intracellular sodium, there is efflux of potassium. That will lead to endoplasmic reticular swelling, cellular swelling, and loss of microvilli and blips. Also, decrease ATP, decrease energy. That means there is decrease in the oxygenation. That means increase in anaerobic glycolysis. What's that lead to? Decrease the glycolysis, increase the pH. This will lead to clumping of nuclear chromatin. Also, if there is oxidative phosphorylation, that means there is detachment of ribosomes. This will lead to decrease in protein synthesis. Clear? In mitochondrial damage, there is ATP depletion, failure of energy dependent cellular function. This will lead to ultimately necrosis under some condition, leakage of mitochondrial protein that cause apoptosis. Influx of calcium. This will lead to activation of enzyme that damages cellular component and may also trigger apoptosis. In accumulation of reactive oxygen species, there is covalent modification of cellular proteins, lipid, nucleic acids. Increase the permeability of cellular membranes may affect plasma membrane, lysosomal membrane, mitochondrial membrane, typically lead to necrosis. Accumulation of damaged DNA and misfolded protein, this trigger apoptosis. Summary of mechanism. As we said, decrease in ATP, mitochondrial damage, entry of calcium, increase reactive oxygen species, there is membrane damage, protein misfolding, and DNA damage.